There are so many bad ideas surrounding fasting and the season of Lent that I've sort of avoided addressing it altogether. But that's not what this channel is about. I'm supposed to be addressing these issues head on. So let's get to it. I think fasting is one of the most life-affirming and empowering disciplines a person can practice. People make it about all kinds of things, but the basic idea behind fasting is actually pretty simple. Most of us in the modern Western world tend to get what we need. Most of what we want, too. If I'm hungry, there's food in the fridge, or I can walk a block down the street and for $5 get some food instantly. I can pretty much do whatever I want, whenever I want. And maybe that's not entirely good for me. What if I said no instead? What if I didn't give myself everything I want? What if I didn't even give myself everything I need? What would happen? In the contemporary world, we fast all kinds of different things for various reasons. And pretty frequently, when we fast, we're giving up our guilty pleasures. And that can be fine. But there's a reason why traditionally fasting is associated with food. Because you don't just want food. You need food. If a person goes very long without food, they feel the effects in their body. It's a visceral experience. And once we're not getting that need met, we start to experience a lot of emotions and exhibit a lot of behaviors that seem out of character for us. As we begin to deny ourselves what we desire, the voice of that desire becomes louder, more dominant, more insistent. And if we still refuse to give in, it can become quite a burden. We begin to recognize just how easily we give in to our desires, often without even thinking about it. I feel hunger, I satisfy that hunger, I move on with my life. But if we always say yes to our desires, we become like slaves to them rather than masters. Our desires are supposed to serve us by cluing us in and guiding us to what's good in the world. But if I never question those desires, then I've given up my authority and my autonomy. I need to be able to listen to my desires and take them seriously without having to give in to them all the time. And that ability is developed through the practice of self-denial. For this day, I won't give myself what I want, for my own good. And when I do that, my body chemistry, the way my mind and heart respond, all begin to change. We may find ourselves becoming less kind, less generous, more prone to anger and despair and fear. It doesn't take long before going without food has a profound effect on our emotional and mental well-being. It becomes very difficult for us to be our best selves. We begin to realize that the well-behaved, civilized versions of us are more fragile than we want to think they are. We want to feel like we have control over ourselves, like we're good people, we try to do what's right. But the reality is that when we're not getting our needs met, all that falls apart really quickly. Because the truth is that we're not independent beings. We are radically dependent on each other, on our social structures and institutions, and on nature to make sure that our needs are constantly being met. Because only when our needs are constantly being met do we even have the option of being our highest selves. Most conflict and violence in the world is people who have given up on society meeting their needs, and so are taking matters into their own hands. So the truth is that you and I, even the greatest self-made man, is a radically dependent being. We desperately need each other to keep making sure that our needs are being met, so that we can continue being who we are. Fasting has this enormous power to dispel the myths we like to tell about ourselves and remind us what it really means to be human. Part of what it means to be human is that we have needs that must be met. We have to devote certain time and energy into making sure that all of our needs are being met. And that means self-care. And it means care for the other. And it means care for the environment. It also means subverting social structures and institutions that deprive people instead of empowering them. Now, we might already believe these things intellectually, but fasting makes them real in our guts and in our bones. Fasting is a way to experientially confront our own contingency. Fasting well teaches us to have compassion for ourselves. And fasting well teaches us to have compassion for others who don't get their needs met regularly. Those who are deprived or forgotten or rejected. Those who tend to be forgotten when we actually believe the myths we tell about ourselves. Fasting well teaches us that we are not solely responsible for our own success. The privilege of having my needs met makes me more likely and able to succeed. And fasting, the discipline of experiencing life like an underprivileged person, has the power to teach me that. As you might expect, that can be an unpleasant and destabilizing experience for some people. And that's why prayer is usually paired with fasting, because when we discover these things about ourselves, it's the presence of God that helps us to process it and make sense out of it all. And when we learn that our desires have to be taken seriously, we also learn that everything we need, and even our desire itself, has its roots in God. We discover that just like everything else, our origin is in God and our destination is in God. All the myths that we tell about ourselves are unnecessary, and we can let go of them and expose ourselves to love. You know, a lot of people abandon the discipline of fasting pretty quickly because it starts to expose all these unpleasant weaknesses. But what if that's actually the point? Have you ever had an experience like that where fasting made you feel pretty miserable and uncomfortable? And were you able to interpret that as a spiritually good thing? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I love to hear back from you. And if you like this video and want to see more like it, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of good content coming. The plan is to have a new video up every week. And finally, as Lent draws to a close, I hope that all of you experience just enough painful self-denial that you have a meaningful experience of empowering resurrection on the other side. Thanks for watching.